Great. So, welcome everybody to Career Lab Wednesday. We're here every Wednesday noon to 1 Central Time. And my job is to support you in your career. Thanks, Jane. To support you in developing in your career. And the approach that we take is primarily around your emotional intelligence. There's always going to be skills to learn, new technologies to learn. And we really focus on what about yourself and communicating with people around you, or sometimes with yourself, working through challenges and, some of that internal dialogue that goes on. So that's the focus here. We see your career as a pathway for you to reach your potential. We see your career as a way for you to become who you can become. And so that is the approach that we take here, really looking at you and where you're at in your career is helping you develop. You're there for a reason. And so we invite all questions. Anything from resume review to interviewing questions to managing a relationship with your team or your boss, all questions. If you're advancing in your career and sometimes getting to the point where like, well, I could retire. What's the point of what I'm doing? Do I start my own business? All questions are welcome here. And sometimes you get your question answered in a couple minutes, and that's great. And sometimes you are answering the question over a period of time. And so joining back in to continue your journey is absolutely welcome. So this week's topic is on emotional intelligence and how do you promote your EQ in you? How do you promote that at work? How do you promote that in yourself? And I'll share a little bit about emotional intelligence in the workplace. I want to remind everybody again that your questions don't have to do with the topic. Anything that's on your heart. You are welcome to come off mute and ask a question. You're welcome to type your questions into the comment section. You're welcome to jump in on Zoom. I love it when you do that, and I can work with you directly here. And if you've got a question and you want to remain anonymous, just let us know. Just type in your question and say, keep me anonymous. We'll do that as well. That's totally cool. So again, any questions you have are welcome. It does not have to be about the topic. Got it. Hey, I thank you. I see the thumbs up there. So as I was thinking about, this is really the focus of this career lab is developing emotional intelligence and how that plays out in the workplace. And I've found that, people respond a lot to this. I think it's something meaningful to us. So I'll share a little bit about how this played out in a session last week where the guy I was working with, he had a big deal kind of on the table, millions of dollars potential in this. And he was feeling concerned about his partner and concerned about how they might sabotage the relationship or sabotage the deal because they're going to an investor that, it has a lot of connections and power and they're sort of taking up this person's time. And so they want to be respectful of that. And so he was afraid about, that something was going to go in a way that he didn't like. And so as I'm asking him more questions about it, what we came to realize was that he was uncomfortable. My client was uncomfortable with his own anger and aggression. And so he wanted to just remove that and say, no, I'm not even going to be angry. I'm not even going to, I just want to be in a positive, good space of possibilities. But as we investigated that, it wasn't a reality. It was kind of a nice fantasy, like, oh, that wouldn't that be great if I didn't feel anxious and if I didn't feel angry at my business partner. Welcome, Benjamin. If wouldn't that be fantastic if I didn't feel these uncomfortable feelings? But the reality of it was that he was feeling that stuff. And where we got to in the session was actually having him own his feelings of anxiety and irritation, anger with his business partner, but to own them and use them in an effective way. And if he were only staying in the kind of fantasy zone of, oh, let me just remove these negative feelings, I don't think he would have been effective in that high-powered meeting that he was in, where he really had to have all of his resources available. So what he did, instead of just, trying to get over his discomfort, instead of, trying to use our coaching session like a way that was going to fix him, just coaching is not about fixing. What he did instead was acknowledge that he did feel angry, that he did feel afraid about how this meeting could go. And he used that anxiety to say, you know what, I'm going to contact my partner beforehand, and I'm actually going to use my aggression to assert and say, hey, I'm going to be taking the lead in this meeting. I'm going to ensure that this is going to play out the way I want it to play out. You can be present here, but I want you to know that you don't need to be carrying the anxiety. I'm going to be the one doing that. And so as he's doing this, he's starting to see a new way of being, a new way of integrating his innate resources of his own emotions, instead of labeling them as negative or something he needs to get over. When he started the session off of just like, I don't want to deal with this stuff. Well, it's there to deal with, and it can actually be a resource. And so that's I was thinking about this week's topic and thinking about how emotions play out in the workplace and how to promote my own emotions in a way that is effective for me, for my business partners, for the investor that I'm talking to, for anybody. And so that, that I think there's a lot of ways that this plays out in any relationship. We've talked about this before in the interview process. People will often say something like, well, I want to be confident in the interview. Well, the way to get confidence is to have the success. So in one way, you're not really going to be confident about how you're doing in an interview until you get a job offer. And if I'm degrading myself or saying, oh, what's wrong with you that you're not confident? Come on, George, be more confident here. That's automatically going to be playing against me. It's going to inhibit me in that interview. But if I can pay attention to the anxiety and say, where am I not confident? And I can actually use that as a way to connect with the interviewer. And that is way more interesting, looks way better to the interviewer, because now I'm not trying to convince them that I'm confident. I'm actually using my anxieties to make contact with them about what are the responsibilities of the role in this of the job in this role. And so it's a reframe that we're looking at about our emotions. And even in the resume, oh my goodness, resumes, that's like, a lot of people just want somebody to do their resume for them. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. I think it's a great thing to do. But there's also the importance of being with the discomfort of making my resume and saying, like working through the discomfort of what did I really do in this role? What are the things that because it's going to bring up like what I could have done better, where I didn't ask for more support, where and to be with all that discomfort really helps deepen character and clarity about who I am in the world and what I can offer and where are the areas I want to learn and grow. So that's that's what I'm sharing at the beginning here. Love seeing y'all joining in. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Career Lab Wednesday. I'm going to do a quick recap of how you can get engaged. I love it when you jump in on Zoom directly. I can work with you one-to-one that way. If you can type your questions into the comments section, that's great. If you are viewing in through YouTube or LinkedIn Live, you can type your questions into the comments section and Jane will get those over to me. Do my best to answer those in that time. I invite you to share as much as you want to, ask the questions that you want to. They don't have to be about this topic. In some way, I'll probably always make them about this topic because it's near and dear to me. But you don't have to worry about that. So I would love to hear from folks. How's it going? And how can I be of service to you today? What questions do you have on your heart? Welcome, Nancy. Good to see you. You're welcome to come off mute and share any questions that you have. And Benjamin, good to see you as well.
No questions yet.
Okay, no questions yet.
I'll pop in when I have some.
Perfect. Wonderful. Okay. Oh yes, hello from Indy. Great. Welcome, John Clifford. And Eric, if you're available, we connected over the weekend over email, but I would love for you to share about the process that you've been on in interviewing internally.
Yeah, I'm available. I can speak to that since we have a conclusion on that front. So I had applied for an internal promotional role way back at the end of February. I came on here and at George's persistence, I hadn't heard anything for, I think it was a week or so, and I ended up messaging the HR person who was handling the role, kind of just saying I was expressing interest. I'd love to learn more about the role, at least in an informal fashion. And that really kick-started the process. So I ended up chatting with the HR partner and also the hiring manager as well, kind of in an informal setting. And then went through and had several interviews between HR partner, team members under that hiring manager, and then a interview with the hiring manager himself in person. And then I ended up last week meeting with the hiring manager who told me that I had not gotten the role, but I'd gotten a lot of positive feedback from that, and they actually ended up reaching out to my boss's boss to give them positive feedback on me in general, I guess. So a less than ideal outcome, but I think still a lot of positive takeaways for it. And then coincidentally, there's another internal role that will be posted here that I'm going to throw my name in the hat for, and we'll see what happens with that one.
Eric, thank you so much for sharing that. I'm going to do a quick summary, and then I want to hear what you've been learning from this. So when Eric, applied internally, didn't hear back, and then was coached to take ownership of the process and keep moving the ball forward with interviewing internally. One of the things that we've seen as a kind of common theme in career advancement and how companies work is a lot of companies don't have a great hiring process or a great process of advancement. And so if you're getting your email back to the top of somebody's inbox in a quick, clear, concise way, saying, hey, just getting this back to the top of your inbox, a reminder that I'm interested in this position, you're helping somebody do their job. Everybody's got a lot on their plates most of the time. And so Eric, went at it from this approach of, okay, I'm in this company, I'm going to help this process along here. and then goes through and ends up going all the way through the interviews to a final interview meeting in person. So now he's met a bunch of people in the organization, had email contact, face-to-face contact with him, and they now know him. They have a sense of who he is, and they know, okay, here's a guy who's serious about his career, about advancing. He's hungry for more. He's interested in what we're doing. He's asking good questions. That is worth so much. And then already there's another position opening up. And so he's putting himself in the game in a way that a lot of people might not. Especially, you know, we there's different personality types, and half of us or more are cooperators and analyzers, and are a little resistant to change and possible conflict and discomfort and this kind of thing. And if we can know that and just choose to get a little bit out of our comfort zone, we can really, you know, over the long term, that can make a big difference in our lives. So that's, you know, what Eric's been up to. And Eric, I would love for you to share some about what you've learned in this process, because another important thing is when we're taking risks is to process what are the learns that we're getting from that, so it becomes it helps it become more a part of who we are.
Yeah, I can definitely share some learnings. First one is that I still don't know a damn thing. Because like the final interview, I went in there and I thought it was a solid interview, not great, but not terrible.
Okay.
But I never would have guessed that, when we met, he was spoken very, very highly of me. I was taken aback by it, in a sense, of course, in a good way. And then, telling me that he reached out to, my boss's boss's boss to, personally tell him that he thought that highly of me. And this is a guy who reports to the CEO of our company. So it's not like, it's high up there. But anyway, so actual learnings. I think persistence is still the key.
Wait, hold on.
Okay.
You got feedback about how you're seen. You got a lot of positive feedback in this process. Was that
right.
something, did you know that about yourself before you started this?
I mean, I thought I was pretty solid, but I didn't, maybe I guess I underestimated myself versus what I was being perceived as. So I guess maybe kind of that like good positive disconnect in a sense. That makes sense. I guess that kind of, imposter syndrome is probably what we're looking at.
Yeah, well, Eric, this is really a thing that most humans, we're not, I don't know, there's research on this. Where we're at in evolution so far, we're not that great at seeing and understanding ourselves. And the fact that you're using this process to get a better sense of how you're seen, it's like you're able to take that in more and build on your gifts. I remember years ago when people told me, one of George's gifts is that he's warm and open-hearted. When I first heard that, this is, how screwed up my thinking was, is like, I just heard like, oh, he's kind of dumb and silly. That's how I heard it.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So you know what I'm talking about. And then it's like, I kept hearing that and I was like, wait, I think people actually mean that, oh yeah, George is an open-hearted guy. I feel pretty comfortable telling him stuff. I like being around. And I started to hear it more and more. I was like, wait, this is actually a gift? Really? You're not just lying to me? Like, and so for whatever reason, most of us humans are kind of like this. And so one of the huge learns that I want to underline that you're getting is that you are hearing about yourself in a positive way from people that you respect. And it has an impact for you. It has a valuable impact for you.
Right. So I mean, I'm definitely going to try to, take advantage of that, or, kind of keep that as a nice, warm memory, and I think positive reframing of, I didn't get the role, but I got lots of good feedback, made a very positive impression on a lot of people that were high up in the organization within the company. So, I still think a lot of good things came out of it, even though I didn't end up getting the role. And then this was a case where the candidate coming in, I learned a bit more. They were, they had done, I think, either close to the exact same role at a different company, and they had a post or a master's degree as well. So it definitely was a case where, I wasn't a bad candidate. It was just somebody else was that much better.
That and it's, I think the reason you got in there and made it as far as you did is because you took ownership of it and showed initiative. And their question was probably like, well, we have somebody who we know can do this, but we also have somebody who's like showing initiative and is self-motivated, and that is incredibly valuable. And so they probably had to sort through what they really wanted. And I think you could be proud of yourself that you probably made their job challenging in that way of trying to choose the right, what to do.
Right. Yeah, no, and I definitely think being that persistent was key. And I think it'll definitely be something I make sure to do going forward, really, for any role, internal or external, should I choose to go down that path, and just, not being overly aggressive about it, of course, but just, after weeks sending something, kind of expressing interest and kind of just following up, making sure that, you're continuing to express interest, but not necessarily in a overwhelming fashion. Of course, there's a balance with everything, but I think just being persistent is half that battle, and getting over that kind of uncomfortableness that I definitely felt. But I think you get over it pretty quickly once you see the results.
Well, so cool. Eric, thank you. Thanks for sharing with us. And I'm looking forward to hearing more updates as you're, looking at the next roles and, bringing in anything that you're working on with the current projects that you're a part of.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. Appreciate you giving me the time here.
You bet. Well, I'm going to do a quick reset. Career Lab Wednesday. We're here every Wednesday, noon to 1 p.m. Central Time. We invite all questions career related, anywhere in the process, from resume interviewing all the way up to what's the purpose of my life in this role, anything. No question too small, no question too big. And we've got, Sheena, thank you. Okay, she had to jump off. She's got an interview, and maybe we'll be back after that interview. Oh, shoot, Sheena, I wish I did talk to you a little bit before the interview, but okay, cool. And Asif, I just got to say, hey man, it's great to see you. There's some questions I want to touch on here, but I would love to hear from you. So we've got a question: how do you use EQ as a middle manager who has no authority over junior staff? Let's see if we can do two things. Asif, are you familiar with this? And would you like to share some?
Yeah, very, very familiar. Hey, George.
Hey.
It's been a little bit. It's been a minute since we've talked. It's interesting. Like, I'm really resonating with the conversation you had with Eric right now. As I went for a position last year, similarly, it was one of those where a director level position was posted. They hadn't initially considered me, and I made my case for it. I didn't get it, but there were two things that came out of that. One was that I really resonated, or they got to see sides of me that they wouldn't have otherwise. So that part was really important for middle to higher management, seeing, because you do your day to day. They don't know the skills that you have that they don't normally see all the time, right? So that was a cool thing. And then I went for it, right? I felt good, even though I didn't get it. Like I felt satisfied in being able to go for that position, regardless of kind of how it turned out.
That right there is, I want to underline that for everybody listening. If you, when you're going for a job or a role or anything like that, if you can go into it saying, at the end of this, I want to feel good about myself and how I went for it. That right there is kind of it's something that we can actually control. You can't always control if you get the job or not. But if you can say, okay, I'm going to come out of this interview knowing I kicked ass, I did the best, and I really showed up well, and I'm going to be proud about how I did that. That is something you can do. And it way increases the likelihood of you getting a job or the role or whatever. So, okay, keep going, Asif. Thank you.
Yeah, the I guess being middle management or junior management where you don't necessarily have direct reports, how do you does it show up your EQ or kind of utilize your EQ, right? So I've done this quite a bit where I might not have people that report to me from where I don't do the reviews and things like that, but I've had folks where I've virtually reported to me or I've led projects. So I've had those opportunities because it's all relationship, right? I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's caring about people, and where I've done it in the past 18 months. So I had this big project where I was doing a migration, and we were doing like weekly, if not every other week, weekend type migrations. And so from an EQ perspective, you're working on a weekend 12 hours, sometimes 18 hours. How best can you show, especially as a leader, and we're all leading in different ways, to making sure people are okay, right? So I made sure we had plans to take breaks. Every couple hours we took breaks. I started off with creating a vision. What do we want to feel like when we're at the end of this thing? And then, a couple of times, because we did this over a course of 18 months, I even had, a couple meditation sessions. So it was a very cool way to integrate things that I had learned at Wright into the workplace and showing that I care, because people really appreciated that. They hadn't seen quote unquote managers, right, or leaders caring about them in this way. And it had a lot of, virtual currency, I guess, in that sense.
Whoa. Okay, Asif, this is great. Thank you for sharing this. We'll throw a link into a video that is about the foundational stuff in emotional intelligence. So that's something you can save and review later. It's just educational stuff. I'm just putting that out there for everybody else who's listening in here. Thank you, Jane. So Kim had a follow-up question from the first one about how to manage when you don't have the no authority over junior staff. Well, then she's asking, okay, and you're being empowered by the VP to coach, but are getting pushback from the team. And so one of the things that, who feel like you don't have the right to tell me what to do. So what I was hearing you saying, Asif, there's a few key things there, is that one, you're partnering with them. So it's not your quote unquote job necessarily to do this, but you're doing it because it helps overall, and you're getting to know them and you're visioning. And so there's what do you want out of life, out of this role? And really asking that question to somebody is a much bigger deal than I think we usually kind of understand. And that's a real skill. And so the two things that were popping out to me about what you were saying in regards to Kim's question here.
No, and it's one of those where it's scary, right? Because this is now, it takes them away from their day-to-day in that sense. Seeing actually people care about them. It doesn't always come off as because people don't expect it. So they're hit sideways from it, and not everybody's open to it, at least in the beginning. So sometimes some people will jump on it because they feel really good about it and actually feel like people are caring for them. Some people might be resistant to it, and it takes time. I remember one time we were taking a break, and a couple people came on and started talking, and I had a choice at that moment. I could yell at them and say, "Hey, what are you doing? We're supposed to be taking a break," or I can kind of go easy with them and say, "Hey, what's going on? Maybe you don't want to take a break, but think about the other folks that are taking a break now. You're also stopping them from taking a break. Is this really what your intention is?" And then, there's different ways to approach that, kind of being a hard ass in some ways. And sometimes you might need to do that. But a lot of the time, it's more about, being soft and asking and kind of a query about what's going on with you, kind of thing. And they might or might not answer. But generally, if you kind of put it in a way, "Hey, I get it. You might not want this, but now you're taking away from others," most people will acknowledge and kind of desist at that moment.
Oh, cool. Okay. So there's some of those things about creating this space for listening to happen. And that is, I've told this story before, but I'll tell it again right now, and maybe I'll do it even faster. But the importance of one-to-ones and the importance of getting to know people. So back in the late 90s, when companies realized, oh my gosh, we maybe don't have to fly people around to all these meetings all the time, some of these global companies. So we're just going to do email. What could go wrong? And so they put the best managers and things on it and launch a project with this global company, and it fails miserably. They're like, what happened here? So 12 years of research later, with the guy who coined the term emotional intelligence, Daniel Goleman, what they found was that if a human doesn't have a template of who they're talking to, it's really hard to make a decision. So if I just get an email, I'm just sort of like, and I just don't, even if it's something I understand, I don't decide on it because I need that emotional connection to somebody. So they found that the best way to do these global projects was fly everybody in to one place for a weekend and to not have them talk about business at all, but just about family life, vacations, what they like, hobbies. And that set this deep template for everybody of who they're working with. So 6 months later, they get an email from Zoe and they're like, oh, okay, I care. And, and that whole thing. So we say when you're starting in a new role, the best thing you can do is set up one-to-ones, 15-minute coffees or just check-ins, getting to know people, getting to care about them. And that's gonna pay off huge in the end. And so it seems like it's a little inefficient. It's like, oh, we just want to get to work, but in the long run, it helps the work happen. So I love what you're sharing there, Asif, about, how to set yourself up when managing, and especially when it's not your direct job title.
Right.
But even if it is, it's important to do that. So and Kim says it makes it hard to get things done under deadlines. Totally. I know it's I hear you. Totally. Well, okay, so quick room reset. This is Career Lab Wednesday. We're here every Wednesday, noon to 1. Oh yeah, post-COVID, it's harder to get people to connect. Yeah, no, I suspect we're going to be seeing the implications of COVID and this whole thing that's been going on. This probably has profound implications for the way that we work. I imagine in kids in school, there'll be probably noticeable differences in this. So absolutely, Kim. Anyway, so yes, so there's a few ways you can join in. Love it when you jump in on Zoom directly. I can talk to you one-to-one that way. If not, you can always type your questions and comments into the comment section, and I'll do my best to engage that way as well. So, You're welcome. You're welcome, Kim. Thank you for asking. I bet there's a lot of people relating to that. That's part of the point of this setup with Career Lab, is that people are learning vicariously. So the questions that you have great value for yourself and other people. So I really appreciate everybody who shares. Before moving on, I want to check in with you, Asif. It's been a minute since we talked. Is there something that you are wanting in joining in today? Any way that we can serve you?
I wanted contact today, so that was one of the big reasons why I joined. So I did get laid off 2 weeks ago.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I was at True Value for 4 years, and it was a shock. I think I was ready to leave. I think I started kind of soft looking early January, but still was working hard. So it was a shock in the fact that everybody's hurting right now. A lot of people are hurting, right? A lot of big layoffs, and this was one of them. So I took the last couple of weeks off. I had a lot of family in town, and so that was a perk of being off, right? I got to spend time with family. Otherwise, I'd be at work or whatever. So I got fully disconnected, spend time with them. Now they're all gone. So I'm kind of back in the job hunt now, and networking, definitely a lot of networking going on right now, talking to folks, looking at LinkedIn. And it's interesting, your Career Lab thing popped up as I was kind of just researching. And so I'm like, all right, let's do this for a bit and connect and get some loving from George, and then get back at it afterwards.
Oh, fantastic. Well, Asif, I'm glad you joined in, and I want to share for everybody. So Asif and I know each other for years. We have been doing emotional intelligence, personal growth work together. And so, Asif, you named some things real casually there that are really important. Number one is the connection. That's a thing when we're in a job search. That can be a really lonely, scary time because things are unknown. And so often people's tendency is, oh, well, I got to go be valuable or make sure I get something done before I'm going to allow myself to feel good or feel some contact with some people. Well, that doesn't last that long. Like, it's not nourishing. Like, we need food and water to be able to function. We need contact to be able to function. And there's a ton of research on this. You could look into attachment theory. The very upsetting way to look at this, I'll share it, about how important connection is. When back in World War II, there's all these, I'll probably tear up about it. It's so upsetting. There's all these, soldiers, Nazi soldiers, that are encouraged to have a bunch of babies to have the race go on. And then they go out and they're fighting and they're dying. And so there's all these kids, all these little babies born. And they don't have their parents there. So they're all set up and they're sheltered. They have food, warmth, but they don't have any contact with people. They're very limited, a nurse running by here or there. And there's videos, you can look at on YouTube. It's horrible. And none of them develop. Most of them don't make it a year. Although they have food, they have water, they have air, but they don't have the human contact. And you can see the lack of development that happens. So, that's an extreme example, but when in challenging times, this is challenging times in this country. It's like not, no secret here. Having contact, getting contact with people is really important. We need that nourishment. We need that connection if we're going to be functioning as well as we could function. It's not just a nice thing. It's not just after I work my butt off and do all this, intimidating stuff of sending out job applications, blah, 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 responding to ads, then I can reward myself with a phone call or meeting somebody. No, you're going to be in much better shape if you're doing like you are, Asif, and getting the contact in that's going to help fuel you. So I hope that that's landing for everybody. And I love that you know that and you're jumping on here and I get the benefit of seeing you. So really appreciating you. And then you said networking. I mean, so there's that part of it. Then there's the networking that's some meetings are more uncomfortable. Especially it seems as I'm networking where there's a possibility of me working there because now I'm getting excited. And so networking is incredibly important in in your career, in your job search. There's a lot that has come out about that. I've shared this many times. The CEO of ZipRecruiter said, yep, we don't look at 80% of the resumes that get sent here. So it really has to do with networking, especially the older we get. So Asif, I thought what you were sharing was important to underline more for people about just how important meaningful connection and networking is.
No, it's crazy. Like you're, and that's spot on. The stats of 80%, right? Like, yeah, some might get through, but it's very rare that would happen. That having someone hand deliver your resume, either HR or the recruiter or whatever, you have a greater likelihood of getting in. And I guess on the flip side of that, right? I was talking to a recruiter this morning, and the company that he's working for, like, I can see working there, right? You start to like some things about the company, and with any of this stuff, which as the more you like it, the more possibility there is to get hurt when you don't get it, right? So then on the other side of that, to be able to tend to your hurt in that also, right? So.
Whoa, that's really cool. I think that probably ties in for Eric, who's about sometimes people will not allow themselves to go for something they want and to really let themselves want it, because what you just said, Asif, is that the level of hurt goes up the more I want. And so, and then the question is as well, do I want to be somebody who really went for it and allowed themselves to feel the hurt of not getting something, or do I want to be somebody who was, chose not to risk things and to feel more hurt and, contained and held myself back? And, when looking at it that way, most people choose, okay, I'll risk getting more hurt by going for what I want. Oh, cool. Well, Asif, is there anything more that you're wanting around, next steps or anything there?
Not necessarily. I mean, I talked to Outplacement on Friday. I think it's kind of just getting the word out, right? So I'm looking for senior manager, director level positions. That's going to be my next thing. And so if you come across anything IT related, engineering, operations, architecture, infrastructure, I've kind of done all of that. So kind of keeping your eyes open, or anybody who's listening to this, if you hear of anything, if you run across anything, to, let me know. Cool.
Yeah, and anybody, you could message me or Asif. You're easy to find on LinkedIn, Asif. So yeah, I would, any leads, you can send them to me or Asif. And cool. Well, and I'll say too that I just on the topic of emotional intelligence. So what you just did there, Asif, of making an ask. So to walk through what happens internally with an ask, there's the fear, because it's like, I might be rejected. Like there's the scarcity of like, nothing might happen from it. And so they're just facing that fear. And then, okay, and then I might even feel hurt if I don't get any response. And, or if George or somebody is like, dude, this guy's just freaking asking me to like keep an eye out for him, so all of that cha-cha is going on. And then there's even the anger, the, irritation, and oftentimes where most of us are usually kind of reactive with it, and that just don't do anything. Just, well, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to ask for help. And that's fine. It's no sin, nothing wrong with it. But it often, if we can kind of tend to those fears and those hurts underneath that and say, oh, take the risk. It's okay. You'll be fine. Even if nothing happens, at least I can say I went for it. So I'm going to assert myself. So we move from reactivity to assertion. I'm going to assert myself and see what happens. And that's this is a micro example of using fear, hurt, anger. Just in literally, Asif, in like 2 seconds, like all that goes on. So I appreciate you sharing that, and I'm wanting everybody who's listening in to get how much there is emotionally going on for us all the time, and that the more that we can be paying attention to ourselves and our feelings, we have more can be more effective with them. We can choose how we're going to use our feelings to move us in the directions we want. Well, great. Well, so we've got about 15 minutes left here. I invite anybody who wants to share or has any questions to come off mute and engage, or to type your questions into the comment section in YouTube or LinkedIn Live. Nancy.
Yes, I'll ask a question. I'll keep it going.
Cool.
I knew I'd come up with at least one if you had me on here long enough. How this is a little bit off of the EQ subject, but more on the networking. What's the best way to network in this time of post-COVID where no one's in office, and is it Zoom? Is it email? Is it LinkedIn? How do you find, and how do maybe some of the other people find the best way to network in this new job market?
That is a fantastic question, Nancy. And I want everybody who's willing to come off mute and share about that, because I think that's something we're all exploring. And my hunch is that Asif and Benjamin probably have better knowledge of that than I do. Is anybody willing to share some about what you're finding in networking post-COVID? Well, I'll start sharing. Nancy, I think it's probably all the above. What I started noticing even before COVID, and in terms of networking, is I'm going to make some generalizations here, and they're not 100% accurate, but I think there's some truth to it. So I was like, at some point I was like, if I'm connecting with somebody who's under 30, I'm only going to text message them. I can give up on the emails. Okay. But if I'm connecting with somebody who's 40 or over, okay, then I'll give a phone call and I'll actually leave a voicemail. And then I would doing this and then noticing what somebody responds to. I have some friends that only message me on Instagram. So I'm going to get on, if I want to contact them, I'm going to get on Instagram and message them there. And it's like a phone call with them is a different thing than and a phone call with them is kind of like a meeting. And then some people, and I think it's all of the above. And it's kind of not the answer I'd want to hear. but that's what I'm finding. Asif or Benjamin, anything to add there?
I'll let Benjamin go. I've been talking a lot.
Oh, Ben, you're on mute.
Saying of 2020.
Yeah.
I wouldn't add anything real different. It's just get to know
Okay.
people you're working with, even if you're like, I was working online and I was still, emailing everybody or messaging everybody.
Okay. So what we're getting is, I think it's how somebody communicates and noticing the differences and responding to them in the way that they want to be responded to. Nancy, how's that helping? Or is it?
It's helpful. I guess the other side to that is those are people you know. How are you meeting the people you don't know? Because those are maybe the people that are gonna find opportunities for you, whether you're looking for a new job or looking for new business. The old ways of being able to go to networking events and, it just doesn't happen as much anymore. So knowing how a person responds, you have to know who they are. What do you do when you don't know the people yet?
Nancy, what are you looking for? Are you new business or a job or?
I'm looking for a job. I am a nonprofit executive. I was an executive director that my organization closed down unexpectedly. So I'm looking for nonprofit opportunities, or that's mostly what I'm looking for, is really executive director type roles in nonprofits. And it's just trying to meet people. And I think probably Asif, you might have the same feeling, or anybody else that's looking for jobs. We say what we're looking for because that's what you want to hear. But a part of talking to people is also to say, hey, maybe your skills would be great in this other area. And that you find out from informational interviewing. So I'm just starting this process. What I was doing before was in the nonprofit sector. Before that, I was a banker. So I want to be able to talk to people and hear some inspiration and make sure I'm not leaving opportunities unthought about.
That what you just said, you could go back and listen to the recording right there. That is a fantastic way to start a conversation with somebody. If you go through, now it is a numbers game to somewhat. If you go on LinkedIn and look at companies that you might be interested in, and you message people who work at those companies, you don't have to know them. I don't know. Let's just say 90 to 95% won't respond because there's so much, messaging going on LinkedIn and emails and everything. But some people likely will. And you have experience, you have valuable experience. And the way that you're in, I'm curious about this and what you would see for me. You would say that to some people, but it might be helpful to look at A leads, B leads, and C leads. So a C lead could be somebody that could give you the job, like somebody who would say, "Oh my gosh, whoa, actually, Nancy, I think we need you here." A B lead might be somebody who would introduce you to the decision maker, and an A lead would be somebody who probably isn't going to connect you anywhere, but satisfies that nourishing connection part where you can kind of talk out loud and think things through. And part of this is to know that when you're doing that, when you're thinking out loud and somebody's holding that space, that you're actually a gift to them. That it's valuable for other people. People like helping, especially when they kind of know what they're helping you with. And if you say what you just said, like in that way of like, I'm exploring and I need some help exploring and I need somebody to listen. And it's like, oh, cool. Yeah, I can take some time to do that and to be of value. And I know that part of my value here is just listening. Oh, that's kind of nice, So the more that you can kind of communicate what you really need from somebody, and you can be looking at some of those B leads on LinkedIn, and there are likely people who would respond. The majority of it will you'll experience it as rejection when it's really just nobody is looking at your message. But you can craft a quick message and get a bunch out, and you'll probably get something. Is this helpful?
That's helpful. Thank you.
Awesome. This is great. I'm so glad you're asking this. I bet a lot of people are wondering exactly what you're wondering.
Nancy out there?
Yeah. What's up, Vern?
I was going to say, Nancy, something that I've been working with and for a long time is Main Street programs. Are you familiar with them?
No.
You might like to check into that, but at the same time, it's a really nourishing situation where the community within which you might be liking and the people that you might be working with are really loving what you do. And as an executive director for that, I was doing that for a long time. And teaching, I couldn't do both at the same time very well. And so I left the executive position, but I understood that there's a tremendous need for those as well. You might check out the Main Street program.
Main Street program, Vern, thank you.
I will. Thank you.
George, I appreciate what you just shared, the virtualness of the persons that are listening in the background. I'm really loving it. Vitality is really great. Something that you mentioned earlier on in the earlier time, George, with regard to resume writing, in many ways, it's a situation where people would oftentimes love to have somebody else do it, work for them. But at the same time, there's those questions that you might need to be asking yourself. And those are very similar to what I've been doing recently with establishing a website.
Oh, yeah.
Oftentimes you'd like to have somebody else do it, but in many ways, the questions are those that you need to oftentimes ask yourself to be prepared for that. They're, difficult, but they're good. Does that make sense?
I think I'm picking up what you're laying down. Absolutely. It's sort of, I think the best approach is a partnership, of where I'm working on my website or my resume, but where I'm also getting feedback from somebody else about it that's helping me see what I'm doing. But if I just try to pass it off to somebody else, I'll often miss a lot of the learning and ability to talk about myself in a meaningful way. So
very true.
That's what I'm hearing. And it is a website I see how that's kind of like a resume. It's like a business card. It's, depending on where you're at, you might need one.
Yeah, you oftentimes are needing to ask those questions. It might be laborious. However, they're important.
Cool. Vern, thanks for sharing that. And thank you for sharing that resource for Nancy and our listeners. That's fantastic.
Yeah, my background is oftentimes in community development, and I've been teaching that for a long time over at Michigan State. And at the same time, because I've been doing this community development, I'm really on the forefront of those communities. And I find that there's a real need out there with regard to Main Street programs.
Cool.
So I really enthusiastically encourage her. Thank you again.
Vern. Thank you. I'll look that up. You might see a message from me if I need some more information, if you don't mind.
Do it. I'm on LinkedIn.
Okay, great.
Well, fantastic. Warms my heart. Thank you, everybody, for joining in today. And I love the connection and the investigation that you are on in your job search. And I am too, by the way, in terms of me developing as a coach and things. So I really appreciate personally hearing from everybody. And welcome you to message me. And for anybody, you're welcome to set up 15 minutes with me. If you want, I will serve you as much as I can in that time. And if continued coaching is something that makes sense, we would discuss it then. So thank you, Jane. There's a link to my calendar in there. And also this and other career labs are available on YouTube. They've got titles, and if you're working on your resume or LinkedIn profile, there's ones that are specifically for that. So you can use that as a resource as well. And let's see. I will also great. Thank you, Jane, for the playlist. And let's get one more time, Jane, the emotional intelligence video. It's about 90 minutes. It's a webinar that's just available now on YouTube. And that's a deep dive into emotional intelligence. And so if that's something that you're interested in, please take a look at that as well. I really appreciate everybody joining in. Thank you for coming into Career Lab Wednesday, where you are the focus of, and your career is the pathway for you to reach your potential and to learn about yourself and have a very meaningful life. Really love your engagement, your questions, your comments, and I will see you next Wednesday, noon to 1 Central Time. Until then, take care, everybody.
Thank you, George.
You bet.